Welcome back to FPL IQ. I'm FPL Rob. I'm joined by teacher FPL Lucian. Today, Brentford are on the agenda. Busy as a bee this transfer window. Maybe an attack. Are they going to bring in someone to replace Toney? Some things we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about predicted lineups, the strengths and weaknesses, the play style, how they're going to set up, and we're going to talk about players to pick or avoid from this side. I'm personally a little bit excited by some of the players at Brentford, but Lucian, what are you thinking about Brentford? How are you today?
Brentford are one of the more atypical teams in the division in terms of relying on data and using it in a very creative way, exploiting advantages that no team ever has. So the question really for me is whether they look upwards and try to aim for a European spot, or would they look downwards in order to try and secure top flight status.
Yeah, so let's go straight into the current predicted lineup. It is a 3-5-2/5-3-2. You know, the wing backs can go forward and back, but how they set up, it looks like a 3-5-2. So we've got Flecken in goal here, who could raise a lot of eyebrows, being 4.5 million, but this all depends on if Raya wants to stay or go. It looks like he's trying to force a move, but Flecken could be number one, 4.5 million. One to keep an eye on. Zanka or Collins, because Collins has just joined the club here from Wolves. Ben Mee, the top defender here, and Pinnock in the back three. Hickey on the right wing back / right mid position, and Henry left wing back, left mid, depending on attack or defense. And then you've got Norgard, Janelt, and Jensen in the middle. And up front, the ones that have got us talking and a bit excited about Brentford, it's Mbeumo and Wissa. So how are you feeling about this lineup, and how do you think they're going to be playing at the start of this season?
I think we have to acknowledge that they have switched between a 3-5-2 and a 4-3-3 more often than we have liked last season. If Rico Henry were a wingback for more than half of his games, he would have had a lot more attacking output. But the fact of the matter is that Thomas Frank has experimented with various different third forwards alongside Toney and Mbeumo up front. From Damsgaard to Kevin Schade, who knows who he'll play, right, besides our dearest Wissa. Because it changes the entire dynamic of their attack from how fast they want to attack in terms of direct attacks to what sort of goals they want to score. Because Ivan Toney, or at least Brentford as a whole in this side, right, when they were promoted into the Premier League, they played themselves as underdogs, exploiting exactly the same way that Danish team Michelin. Yes, the way Michelin exploited their set pieces and throw-ins was exactly the way Thomas Frank set up his side. So now they've retained some of those long throws and set pieces. I think they're the only team in the division that has two set piece takers on corners, like two people at the corner flag, making people guess on whether they want to do in-swingers or out-swingers. This season, I think things are going to be a little bit different considering how much depth they have in central midfield. You mentioned Norgard, Janelt, and Jensen as their their midfield three. But when they pressed Manchester United in their 4-0 opening win last season, it was just a completely different side because Jensen and Joshua Da Silva was the one pressing all the way high up on Luke Shaw. It's really difficult to guess what sort of style Brentford want to play because Thomas Frank has programmed his side to just change formation at will. Sometimes they can even defend as a 7-3, such as when they drew 0-0 against Chelsea. So it really comes down to how they adapt from game to game. And I love this starting 11, but I fully expect, especially without Toney, that front three to be fixed and the back seven to be entirely fluid.
I think overall, looking at the strengths then, I think for a top 8 to 10 side, I think they're fairly priced. I think there's some really good options in here. Mee is a little bit more expensive at 5 million compared to his comrades at 4.5, but he was the 5th highest scoring defender, and he got the most goals from set plays, which is very interesting because I think it was 13. I need to just double check, but he got 3 goals. But in terms of an interesting fact that I came across is we are seeing an increase. So usually corners were overvalued, but we have seen a like a 1% increase over the last few years, and it looks like we are getting more goals from corners. There was 151 last season, which is up from 146, which is up from the season before that, 132. So teams are making more of an advantage. So 13.9% of goals coming from corners, and you've got the player who is a very, very good threat in me at 5 million. So in terms of set pieces, Brentford as a whole are the top ones, and you've got one of the defenders who are top for that. I just think the value for Brentford here, when we talk about our top picks, you're looking at sort of blanket 4.5 million for defenders, and you're looking at blanket sub 7 million for the attackers. I just think for a top 10 or top 8 side, you're getting really good value for your money there. What do you feel about the strengths of Brentford?
The strength of Brentford at the moment is that whatever they do or whatever they can do, they do extremely well. Right now, as it stands, they are fantastic at taking a lead and hitting teams on the counter absolutely devastatingly. And I'm not referring to what Ivan Toney can do. I'm really referring to managing game state and having the right players pop up at the right time. He has 4 to 5 different central midfielders that he can choose in that starting midfield three. Norgard is the only nailed guy, but he can choose from Janel to Da Silva to Jensen to many others. He's played Damsgaard as one of these central midfielders before, and that dictates the tempo that they play. Because if they go more offensive, they basically play long balls in behind for Mbeumo to chase. If they want something more steady, then they will have Janelt and Onyeka. Yes, Onyeka was one of the brightest stars just after the World Cup, playing in that right half space, working with Ivan Toney on the right side. Really, it just comes down to how they want to play, because last season they've shown that they can win games by adapting to opposition. They did it brilliantly against Man City, and this season it just comes down to whether we take them seriously rather than whether they take themselves seriously in the division. The thing about Brentford all being priced less than 7 million, right? It's not because the players are bad. It's not because the rest of the players are better than them. It's just because we don't know who starts, besides Ivan Toney, of course. And with Mbeumo, he has been let down by his finishing. We ask ourselves the same question, right? Do we value overperformance as skill compared to the rest of the league? Do we value underperformance as, the traditional cliche FPL face due? Is Mbeumo due this season? For me, he is. And as the new talisman of Brentford for now, I can't see anything past that particular value.
When we talk about our picks, I think we're both going to be talking a bit about Brian Mbeumo, but 36 starts out of 38. You can't really ask for. You can only ask for a couple more than that. And 9 goals and 9 assists is excellent numbers. And if with Toney out, so moving on to the weaknesses, that is a weakness. No talisman. Toney, you know how important he is. He even worked himself into he was getting towards the England team until, of course, now he's got his suspension. But you said about Mbeumo's finishing, it did look like it was a little bit better this season, but he was infamous for how many times he was hitting the post or crossbar, which I always argue. So just as a little sub point, I argue that should be a shot on target, because someone who P-rolls it to the goalkeeper, it's a shot on target. But if you've hit the post, that is like as close to a goal as you can get. That's closer than like the ball going into the keeper's arms. Anyway, that's a sub point. But something that is weak. So they've lost Toney, who is the clinical finisher and the talisman of the side. And worryingly, they only the second most shots on target conceded. So they concede. That's why Raya was so high up. So even though defensively we see them as a pretty solid side, the second most shots on target conceded. That is why Raya, I believe, was the top scoring goalkeeper last season, and why Flecken could be fantastic at 4.5. But if the goalkeeper's not making all those saves and getting those save points and the ball's going in, that's going to be a big problem for a side that concedes so many chances. And fourth, most shots conceded in general. So you're looking at sort of relegation-esque amounts of chances are conceded. But the fourth best for big chances and fifth most for clean sheets. So they seem to concede a lot of chances, but not actually big chances. Seems like they're conceding a lot of quantity more than quality, but you just don't want to have a side that is conceded so many chances in the Premier League if you're in the bottom 5 for how many chances you conceded, that would worry me as a defensive owner. But it does explain why Raya was the number 1 goalkeeper, I think, last season because of how many chances. But at least they're not high for big chances, because that would ring alarm bells. If they're high for big chances conceded and for attempts on target and attempts on goal, that would really spell trouble. But that's not quite the case. But I just saw that as a particular weakness. No Toney, and just how many chances on target they concede. Any weaknesses that you found with Brentford?
Funny you mention chances conceded, because there are very few instances where we recall David Raya making an actual big save. And, you've already rightly put it, if a striker P-rolls a shot towards goal, that counts as a save as well. So really, perhaps we should also look at the XG per shot that Brentford concede to see if they're high up on the list. I don't believe that they are, simply because they position themselves not to block shots like Burnley. They just position themselves to allow shots so that they roll to Raya, or at least they're at a savable height for Raya. That's basically the block that Brentford set up. They intentionally have a block that funnels attacks outwards towards the flanks, and they allow crosses in. So most of the time it works, because they know that aerially they are dominant in their box, especially when they have their 3 central midfielders inside the box too. Because whenever Brentford defend, right, like, you imagine a side that's 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2, whatever, 4-5-1 even, 4-2-3-1. Whenever they set up, whenever they defend, they don't look like a 4-5-1 unless it's Sean Dyche. They look like a 4-4-1-1. Every time we attack, we know what teams' shapes look like, but we don't know what their defense looks like. And with Brentford, they don't look like the traditional 4-4. They don't even look like the modern 4-5 that defensive coaches use. They actually can choose between a 5-3, which is getting more and more popular, or they just squeeze everybody into a single line and they just wait in the box. It's quite hilarious. So in that sense, they don't put 2 layers of players in front of the ball, because when you do that, if you're slow and it's towards the later stages of the game, you concede deflections, unlucky deflections that result in own goals. And you would realize that Brentford actually concede very few own goals, because they either allow shots through for Raya to save, or they just, let it fly over. And that's okay. That's honestly completely okay from Brentford's perspective. And that is what I suspect is part of the gambling philosophy that the owners try and progress with. In terms of weaknesses, I still find that Brentford themselves are suffering from a case of overperformance. If we talked about certain teams overperforming and we perceive it as skill, I do believe strongly that Brentford are one of those teams that will regress to the mean this season unless they do something completely different. Kevin Schade might change my mind, might make me eat my hat, but for now, I do feel that Leroy Sané copycat is not enough to transform Brentford into a side that challenges for Europe again.
I can give you the stats for expected goals conceded. They are 9th in the Premier League, but expected goals conceded from open play, they're 12th. Again, they're not in the top 10 for that, so it's not ideal. But yeah, they are quite low in the table from open play conceded, which isn't good. They're just ahead of the likes of Wolves and Notts Forest. And if I'm telling you a defensive player from Wolves and Notts Forest and Southampton and Bournemouth, you're going to be like, oh, I don't want them. So that might be one for Brentford. So let's look at the positive, the players that we're going to pick. We've both got the same one. I've been singing his praises since his price came out as a 6.5 million midfielder. I've already talked about him today with his 9 goals, 9 assists, 36 starts, I think I said. Is Mbeumo. No Toney, he's probably going to be up front. And if he's not, even as a winger, 6.5 million I don't think is a terrible price. And he just seems to get better and better the last couple of seasons. Anything you want to add about Mbeumo?
I can't name a 7 million midfielder in the game right now. 7.5, I can name a few. 6.5 is a lot. But 7 is that awkward dead range. I'm just thinking to myself, if Mbeumo doesn't work out and I want to stick with Wisa, are there any 7 million midfielders in FPL that I want? And I think the answer is no. I think that's the attraction of Mbeumo right now. It's either you splash the cash and use your 3 million in the bank that you didn't tell me about to upgrade him into a Rashford, or you just downgrade him or sell him for somebody similarly priced like a Brighton midfielder. Yeah, I think that's the real attraction of Mbeumo, that access to everyone in his price bracket and below.
Yeah, there's a lot of good options for 6.5, and if he does play up front, you're onto a winner there, aren't you? So in terms of our second choice, I've gone for Henry, 4.5 million. Like you said, if he plays more games than not in that left wing back, left mid position, his attacking output's going to be even better. And the fact he's got Spurs, Fulham, Palace, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Everton, Forest, United in the first 8. I always say I look at the first 8 games because I'm probably going to wildcard in those first 8 games. If I'm looking for a player to rotate, like a Botman or one of the Aston Villa defenders for 4.5 million, I think he can rotate really, really well, and he's very well priced at 4.5 million. Your second choice?
With Brentford, just like some other teams, they have one talisman and then their potential massively drops off after that because of the goals and how they're spread among the midfield and forwards. I, at the moment, cannot foresee Henry directly assisting goals. I think he'll be involved, but it'll be one of those cases where either wingback would, bomb into the box 80th minute and there'll be like a massive amount of crosses before somebody gets their head onto it. For me, the person that delivers in the later stages of the game would either be Matt Jensen on the counter or, for me, Wisa on the left flank. Now, the thing about Wisa, at least for me, is that he is objectively, ability-wise, better than Mbomo in every aspect. He just has less minutes. It's either he's injury-prone or he has an attitude problem, but objectively, he's a better shooter, he's a better runner, he can get behind defenses. Tactically, he's a lot more sound. I just feel that perhaps Mbomo's more disciplined, and that's why Wisa hasn't started enough games. Wisa has scored all types of goals, from penalty box, poaching types, getting behind defenses, shots from range, buccaneering bursts into the box. He's done them all. So it's just a matter of whether Thomas Frank will allow him to do it on a more regular basis. Yeah, so that's why he's my second pick.
6 million, and if he is that starting forward, either down the middle or at the wing, whatever, 6 million, you get what you pay for, right? So if he is in that starting 11 and you are looking for just a cheap person, a warm body next to Haaland in your 3-5-2, and you want to put all the money in midfield and some in defence, and you just need a starter for 6 million, I think Weiss is if he is starting, you can't go wrong, and that's why he's my third choice. So I'm Mbeumo, Henry, and Wisa. So your third choice?
You mentioned Rico Henry, and I do like the guy. I do, especially when Ivan Toney's in the side. When Ivan Toney's in the side, Rico is so involved in their big chance creation, it's scary. But without Ivan Toney, I do find that they will rely more on their set pieces. And this is something we don't talk about enough. Not their corners, but their throw-ins. Just like the Stoke of old, Brentford's long throws are precisely why they have bought Nathan Collins from Wolves, because Collins himself has a very good long throw in him. They normally aim it towards the near post in Toney or Norgard, and he would be the one that flicks on for players in the box to finish. So this is where I feel Ethan Pinnock comes into the fray, because Pinnock is the one that basically makes that far post run whenever Norgard flicks the ball across. Of course, Ben Mee too will be in there, but I suspect that Ben Mee will be more for an aerial finish, whereas Pinnock is the one that's like the defender with more guile, the one that's more street smart, the guy that just hangs around and waits for a loose touch or something like that. And that's where I feel Pinnock will shine if he nails a starting spot ahead of Collins.
So going into the weaknesses of the side, or just people to avoid. Sorry, mine is going to be me. I know we said earlier he's 5 million, and that's what puts me off. So he's 0.5 million more expensive than all the other defenders, and even though he was the 5th top defender last season, you can't always look at the entire point of the season to suggest that this season of value for money. If it was 4.5 million, I wouldn't have said really any of the Brentford players would have been weak. But the fact he's 5 million, he's the same price as Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, Brighton. I don't have Brentford in that tier. So when we talk about some other teams, like we've talked about Bournemouth before, and yeah, they're not great options, but at least they're fairly priced. I just feel that he's 0.5 million too expensive for the team that he's in. He's not going to get you the clean sheets that I think 5 million defenders should offer you. I don't think he's going to be scoring the goals or getting... He's not a mega attack. He's just a set piece attacking defender. But it's just the fact that you can have literally, apart from the big premium defenders, you could get a top 4 team defender for 5 million that is probably nailed as well. So I would just say not a trap, but one to avoid would just be me. People will pick him because they'll see him on the top scoring defenders list. But I just think he's 0.5 million too expensive, and I'd be much happier. I'd even risk a 5 million Ake or a Kanji at Man City and have a good backup rather than pay 5 million for me.
It's such a shame because Brentford are probably one of the sides that you can count on for clean sheets. Probably one of the few. But at this stage, really, for me, the reason my FPL rank is horrible is because I love hunting on midfielders that are less than 4.5 million in price. I've been guilty of owning Joshua Da Silva. I have been guilty of owning Joel Murphy for his double game week last season when Newcastle had it. I absolutely love a basement bargain. So please, everyone, do not buy central midfielders that are cheap. And even though they've shown their ability, the likes of Joshua Da Silva will definitely not usurp the current starting three.
Yeah,
so that's what I would say.
And they're all sort of, apart from Mbeumo, they're all like 5 to 5.5 million the starters, and they're more defensive. They like you said earlier, they have a role and they know exactly what they have a great plan. For every team, it's like they have, this is my role and that's all I'm going to do for this game, and they play it to perfection for what they're supposed to do. And you look at the midfield central three, and they're not going to offer you the goals and assists that other players are going to. So you're not, even though you're saving a bit of money, there's a reason that they're worth 5 to 5.5 million, and that's basically it. Just the last thing then before we go, I've given these guys, I'm going to say a 7 out of 10, because I think they've got some real gems. No, sorry, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. I'm going to stick to my original, because I think, apart from me, any of those defenders and the goalkeeper, especially Flecken, if Raya goes for 4.5 million, you said yourself about clean sheet potential. If you've got that goalkeeper for 4.5 million, and we said earlier about not having big chances conceded, but having shots conceded, he could be a real star. That defense as well could get clean sheets for 4.5 million. And then, of course, you've got Wieser as a very, very good 6 million forward, and Mbeumo as a potential striker out of position at 6.5. So I'm going to give Brentford an 8 out of 10. Because I think that they've got some good value. But like you said, midfield, I'm not going to offer you anything. But the goalkeeper, defence, and the striker could. What would you give Brentford out of 10?
Solid 7. Absolute solid 7. Nothing in midfield, well, apart from Bomo. And everything to play for up front, in defence, at the back. It just comes, like, they're 7 out of 10 because they're not essential. But they reward people who pay attention to them. And that's what I like about this side.
Yeah, and they do have a nice, if you don't want to look at the first 8 games and you want to just look at the first 4, the first month, right? Yes, they started Spurs at home. It's not ideal. You don't know what Spurs is going to show up, right? But then they've got Fulham, Palace, and Bournemouth. So if I force you to start a defender for those 3 games for 4.5 million, I don't think you'd be particularly. You wouldn't look at your starting 11 and think, "Oh no, I've got to start Pinnock against Palace." You know, you're not going to be too upset about that. So to start the season with, I think they're as good as any other 4.5 million defenders out there. But that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed joining Lucian and I for our Brentford guide. Next one's going to be a very popular one, I think. Next up, it's going to be Brighton. But Brentford, are they as sweet as honey to start the season with, or are they going to leave you stung? Let us know in the comments below what you feel about Brentford. Do you think Mbeumo is a great option at 6.5 million? Do you think Wieser at 6 million? Ben me even at 5 million? Or are you going to trust the goalkeeper? Let us know your thoughts about Brentford in the comments below. And as always, have a good one.